I'm Indy, and this is another exciting episode of Out of the Trenches, where I sit here in the chair of wisdom and answer your questions about the First World War. Tegan Tripp writes, did a lot of German Americans feel a sense of duty to the fatherland when war broke out? The USA had a huge German population at the time, and I would think at least some of them would enlist in the German army. German Americans, or Reichsdeutsche Americans, were the largest non-English speaking minority in America at that time, actually, mostly living in either the Midwest or in urban areas, and they made up as much as a third of the population in these areas. They did not, though, often agree with Germany's aggressive politics. Some groups even outright hated the Kaiser, mostly religious groups like Catholics or Lutherans, but they still didn't want to see America at war with the old country. I mean, their political allegiance was to the USA, but they did value their German heritage highly and wanted the USA to remain neutral. Their biggest voices were the hundreds of German-American newspapers in which they published their anti-war opinions, which led to them often being accused of being unpatriotic by those who had a more Anglo ideal of the USA. It's a long story, and it's a complex issue. American politicians even accused the German minorities of disloyal tendencies because of their anti-war agendas. And there was a big political back and forth of what is true Americanism, what that actually meant. Public harassment at the hands of groups like the Knights of Liberty against German Americans happened. President Woodrow Wilson, even called them alien citizens, and there was even a big German spy hysteria at one point, but that is a topic for another special. But to say it straight out, most Germans fled Germany to escape its Prussianism, and they did not want to go back to fight for it. Addicted to the Great War. Oh, that's a great name. Addicted to the Great War writes, hi Indy, I love this channel and your chair of wisdom. Where can I get one like that? Well, you can give me a lot of money. Got a real question. Okay. My direct line ancestors were all in the US by the time of the Great War, but some relatives still living in Galicia ended up in the Thalerhof Internment camp, apparently interned by their own government, Austria-Hungary, for being Russophiles. Can you tell us why Austria-Hungary set up this camp, how one ended up a prisoner there, what happened to the prisoners during and after the war, and whether or not there were other camps like Thalerhof? Do you have any more parts of that question that you'd like to ask, Mr. Great War fan? Okay, anyhow, Thalerhof served as an internment camp for civilians who the Austro-Hungarian government thought were of questionable loyalty, mostly Carpatho-Russian and Ukrainian minorities like the Lemkos, who were thought of as being culturally close to Russia. During the first few years of the war, more than 20,000 people were imprisoned there. This was until 1917 when Emperor Karl closed it. And hundreds, well, probably thousands, of people died there, but we don't have anything at all like exact numbers. And once you were there, you had to openly renounce any cultural ties to Russia to be released. But you know, camps to intern civilians were sadly quite common in the 20th century, though Thalerhof was one with exceptionally bad conditions. Al-Mansura Abbasid writes, we know that von Lettow-Vorbeck and his loyal Askaris held out until the end of the war in German East Africa. But what was the stance of the local population? Were they supportive of Vorbeck and the Germans, welcoming of the British, or did they just not care about who won? German East Africa was basically in a state of unrest or open war since the beginning of the German colonial era. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed outright or died of starvation and famine. When Lettow-Vorbeck, and of course his enemies as well, ravaged through the country during World War I, civilians would be forced to be carriers for the army, and the army would just take what it needed or what it wanted from the villages. So I suspect the locals didn't really care who won as long as the fighting stopped and they were finally left alone. There were, of course, people who profited from the German colony, and they were probably not too happy to see their privileges disappear. But anyway, it's very hard to make a bold general statement about any of the colony's citizens because there were millions of them, and they were all individuals with different opinions and ideas, which is something that is often forgotten when talking about the topic. If you want to know more about German East Africa during the war, you can click right here for our special episode about that. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. See you next time.